finger pointing appears to be the official pastime of the Washington political establishment, and there is no shortage of it after the disastrous evacuation of Afghanistan. Everybody screwed up. That's how one former diplomatic official summed up the debacle. The Pentagon is privately blaming the mess on the State and Homeland Security departments, who are in turn blaming the White House for slow decision-making. State Department spokesman Ned Price got a little flustered today when a reporter repeatedly asked about the process of moving and vetting refugees.
Over the course of our work to establish this network of countries who have agreed to partner with us in our evacuation and transit efforts, we have been in a position to ensure that we have adequate facilities.
Really? Because I'm reading reports that the Defense Department warned State early on in the mission to put agreements in place with other countries to take in refugees. But they didn't, and at one point the military had to stop flights out of the airport for nearly an entire day because there was nowhere for the evacuees to go. The White House should probably expect congressional investigators to come knocking soon. Congress is already showing its irritation. Last night, the House Armed Services Committee finished up the 2022 military budget with a bunch of amendments tapped on, including congressional briefings on terrorism threats since we're no longer on the ground in the region, establishing a bipartisan committee to study lessons learned in the 20-year war, and prohibiting the transfer of money or other goods to the Taliban, which we kind of already messed up on. And that is why the Armed Services Committee also tacked on an amendment to enforce Defense Secretary Lloyd Austin to submit a report on all the U.S. military equipment now in the hands of the Taliban, as well as the Americans left behind. Well, joining us now is a member of that committee, Florida Congressman Matt Gaetz. Congressman Gaetz, great to have you with us tonight. Thanks for being here.
Good to be on with you, Jen. I have to say the big story coming out of the National Defense Authorization Act markup is that House Democrats are running away from Joe Biden faster than the Afghan military ran away from the Taliban in some ways. Instead of backing the White House narrative that this was some spectacular evacuation, that it should be the cause for celebration, House Democrats advanced legislation demanding accountability, audits, reports. Democrats even agreed with us that there should be an accounting of how many Americans were left behind. I guarantee you that's a number Joe Biden doesn't want the American people to see now or ever.
But Congressman, Pelosi's never going to allow a commission, is she?
Oh, it is in the bill, and it was supported by an overwhelming majority, not only of the Republicans, but the Democrats. It's important to make sure that we've got the right people looking at this. I think the Armed Services Committee itself should not delegate the duty of oversight, because the big lie in Afghanistan was that the Afghan military was ever going to fight. If Joe Biden had been honest with himself and the world, we would have seen that the Ghani government was going to fade away like a mirage in the desert. But instead, we relied on them, and 13 American Marines are dead today as a consequence of that bad decision. And now we know, as a result of reporting, Joe Biden was actually encouraging Ghani to lie. I mean, think about that. Joe Biden encourages the president of Pakistan to lie, and then he praises himself for a celebration. But when Donald Trump told the president of the Ukraine, Zelensky, to tell the truth, he was impeached for it. Yet another example of the left's double standard.
I want to bring that up really quick while we're on that topic, because a tweet is popping up now from Jen Psaki back in 2019. I think we can put that up on the screen. She says, it's not just the call transcript. The whistleblower complaint would likely have more details. We need both and not just the call. I think, Congressman, we can all agree on that. Am I right?
We warned Democrats that if they played this dangerous game, that it could one day come back to haunt them. And now we see Joe Biden engaged in deceptive and egregious behavior with a foreign leader that is far worse than anything they ever accused Donald Trump of. I wonder if those same Democrats, Adam Schiff, Jerry Nadler, will agree that Joe Biden is worthy of impeachment. I doubt they will.
Right. Won't be holding our breath for that one. But listen, Congressman, I know you get it, but I'm not sure how many of your colleagues do regarding the anger and the angst that is out there in this country right now because of the way this Afghanistan withdrawal just collapsed, and particularly the death, of course, of 13 brave young Americans. I would like to know specifically your district, Florida 1, which is one of the most military-intensive districts in the entire country, both in terms of active duty personnel as well as veterans. What are you hearing from your constituents in the Florida Panhandle about the debacle of the withdrawal?
Well, Steve, I know you join me in love and pride for all those who fought the global war on terror. We're a better country as a consequence of their patriotism. But too often, that patriotism was squandered, and those brave military families were lied to by generations of politicians in both parties and generals that wanted to pat themselves on the back more than tell the truth about what was really going on in Afghanistan. I've heard feelings of shame, anger, betrayal, humiliation. A lot of the veteran service groups in my district have had increased workload as a result of mental health challenges for veterans. So this is a very tough time for those among us who are the best among us and inspire the best within us. And frankly, they deserve a lot better than the current military leadership they have in the woke generals, Austin and Milley. Austin and Milley built their careers lying about Afghanistan. They should face the music. And you know what? If we had a president with the elevator going to the top floor, they probably would face the music, but their incompetence won't be punished because we don't have a capable president and commander-in-chief.
Congressman, what do you say to Americans? What do you say to all of our viewers out there that they just want transparency, they want accountability, and all they see right now is the media turning on this story, just as Biden turns after those press briefings where he doesn't take any questions and you see the back of his head. That's what the media is doing right now, and people are frustrated. They want answers. They want to see these leaders, so-called leaders, held accountable.
One thing I know about our great country, we don't take a loss well. This is a country for winners. Winning so much, we get tired of it. That's what we were promised. But Joe Biden has ensured losing. And I think that in our core, the country understands what's really going on at 1600 Pennsylvania Avenue. He doesn't have a grip on what's happening in our nation or around the world. He didn't have the right intelligence. He didn't act on it correctly. And you know what's going to happen next? There's going to be a civil war in Afghanistan. ISIS is going to animate the violence. And my prediction, unfortunately, is that the United States is going to back the Taliban. And so we're going to play this crazy jihadist merry-go-round in the Middle East. We're going to squander more of our treasure when we should be focusing on what's going on at home. And we should have at least the clarity of thought and mind to see that we cannot build governments out of sand and blood and turbaned militias in Central Asia.
Right. You know, Matt, by the way, when you were talking there about Americans hating to lose, I thought you were going to launch into the Patton speech for a moment there. But it's very correct, of course, that we do hate to lose for good reasons, particularly when the stakes are as high as they have been in Afghanistan. But regarding your statement about the Democrats, even within the Congress, running away from President Biden, I think part of the reason is the absolute collapse in polling, which all of us see in another new poll out just today from NPR, from the very left-leaning NPR. And even with the garbage inputs of that poll, which are heavily skewed to try to make Biden look good, still they found that Americans who strongly disapprove of Biden's performance jumped just within a matter of weeks from 30% to 41% now. This is a politician in popularity free fall right now. Will your Republican colleagues, will they find the same backbone that you have shown to make sure that they stand up against this incredibly unpopular politician?
We should win, but we have to be worthy of winning, and that means embracing the America First agenda, not reverting to the establishment mean. It turns out that Joe Biden's high approval rating early in his presidency was as frail as he turned out to be. Now, there are, according to Rasmussen, 52% of the country believes that Joe Biden should step down as president. Keep in mind, when Nancy Pelosi greenlit impeachment in the Ukraine hoax against Donald Trump, only 42% of the country supported that endeavor, according to an NBC Washington Wall Street Journal poll, I should say, that was at that same time. So a full 10 points higher for Biden leaving office than for Trump leaving office through impeachment at the time that Nancy Pelosi greenlit that. So you're right. Joe Biden will be an albatross around the neck of Democrats running for re-election in 2022. And hopefully then we can get the oversight necessary to get to the transparency that Jen referenced in an earlier question.
Well, Congressman Matt Gaetz, appreciate all the work that you're doing to hold this administration accountable, and thanks so much for taking time this evening.
All right. Thanks to you both.
Hey, I'm Rob Finnerty. Thanks for watching. If you enjoyed this video, please join the conversation in the comments below. Don't forget to subscribe, too. Hit the bell icon to be alerted to breaking news. And remember, there's a whole lot more on Newsmax TV, America's fastest growing cable news network. Newsmax TV, where real news for real people.